Just 6 years ago, Kevin Parker released his second album, Lonerism, under the band name Tame Impala. It's an album that, in my opinion, features 4 main characteristics. It's smart, simple, psychedelic, and it's sprinkled with different influences on top, like a perfectly made vegan ice cream in the summer. Wait a minute, let's back up. In this video, I'll try my best to explain what makes Lonerism such a smart, simple, psychedelic, and sprinkled record. But before we can understand the record, we need to understand the person who made it, Kevin Parker. Parker is a perfectionist. He created almost every sound on Tame Impala's 3 records himself. He also produced them and even designed the light shows for some of the band's concerts. Now, talking about their concerts, this is Tame Impala. It's a live act based on the members of another band known as Pond. But let's get back to Parker. This is a guy with an insane work ethic and musical ambition. He didn't really have a strict schedule of where and how to record Lonerism though. The early demos were recorded while the band was touring their previous album, Inner Speaker. Most of the instruments were recorded in his home in Perth, while he added vocals and finishing touches to the record in his flat in Paris. According to Kevin, the last few months and weeks in Paris were the worst. As Kevin stated himself in an interview, I felt like I was going insane. I wasn't looking after myself, mentally and nutritionally. It's clear to see that music is an obsession for Kevin. But where did this obsession come from? Well, he surrounded himself with music his entire life. His father was probably his biggest influence to begin with. He bought him his first guitar, introduced him to the Beatles, Supertramp, and many other bands. And because of this, he developed a love for creating and recording music at a very early age. But despite of introducing Kevin to music, his father wanted him to stay away from it as a career choice.
Yeah, well, he was a musician himself, like just as a hobby, and he basically warned me, you know, like don't pursue music as what you do for a living, you know, like because like he loved music just as much as I do, you know, like for how magic it is and mysterious, you know. And he basically just said, like, if you do it as a living, it'll ruin the magic, you know.
Listening to his father, Kevin went to university for engineering, but soon switched to astronomy in hopes of doing something a little bit more fun. He was still focusing way more on his music compared to his lectures though. He created a band with his friends from high school called the D.D. Duns, but it wasn't until the creation of his own project, Tame Impala, in 2007 that he started gaining some recognition. First off with a self-titled EP in 2008. Kevin recruited friends Dominic Simper and Jay Watson to play the EP in a live setting, and this was basically the first formation of Tame Impala as a band. The EP gained them local radio play in Australia and landed them playing gigs at local venues and festivals. Later on, Kevin recorded his first full-length album, Inner Speaker, which was released in May of 2010 to even more positive reviews, making the band's profile and reputation even bigger. But then again, it wasn't until Kevin released his second full-length album, Lonerism, in 2012, that the band became a worldwide phenomenon. I would go so far to say that this album set a new standard for psychedelic rock music to come in the following years. The music on the album is smart, it's simple, it's psychedelic, and sprinkled with different influences on top, like a perfectly made vegan ice cream in the summer. Enough about the freaking ice cream. First of all, what makes this album so smart? I would propose that the guitar and synth effects play a significant role here. The second track on the album is a great example of this. It features heavy use of delay and flanger effects that are very reminiscent of some of the Beatles songs. The sixth song, Why Won't They Talk to Me, on the other hand, use synths that sound a bit more modern, with the complexity of automated arpeggiation. This minute blend of new and old effects make up for a very detailed, versatile, and ultimately very smart sound image. These effects are just small details, but that's the thing that makes this album so smart. It's easy to take in if you listen to it intuitively, but it's full of details if you listen more attentively. Take the drums, for example. If you're an audiophile and if you listen closely, you will notice that they're recorded in a very unconventional way. He mainly uses 3 different mics to record the drums. A Rode K2 valve condenser as a mono overhead. It was actually given to him by a friend that felt sorry for his poor mic collection. He also uses 2 Shure SM57 mics for recording the kick and the snare. Now, what makes this unconventional is that the 57 mic was not originally built for the recording of a kick drum. As a result, the kick hits that you hear on the record sound a bit more rounder because the microphones couldn't pick up on the same frequencies as more conventional microphones would. About this, Kevin says, "Our sound guy always says, it's not a very good mic to use. Are you sure you don't want to try something else that was meant for a kick drum?" But I just love that bop bop sound of the kick. I hate the kick drum sound that's way too clicky. Another fascinating part about this album's recording process is Kevin's use of a dictaphone. It's a small device that can be used to record phrases and sounds on the go. While the band was touring for the previous album, Kevin would occasionally record various ambient sounds wherever he went. He would describe the process as something similar to taking a photo. He would collect a library of these sounds, and then he would pick some of them and insert them as clips into different songs on the album. One example of these ambient clips can be found on the opening track, Be Above It. It's the sound of a person walking through the street, something Kevin recorded by holding his dictaphone out of a window at a hotel where he was staying. Another example is found on the track Keep On Lying, which features a recording of people chatting. Kevin put a delay effect on the clip to make it sound even more psychedelic. About this clip, Kevin said, "It's meant to sound like there's a dinner party going on and there's music playing in the background. And for me, it makes the listener feel even more alienated." Now, this theme of alienation leads me to the next statement that I made about the album, the fact that it's so simple. Almost the entire album focuses in on one specific theme, the theme of alienation. Kevin probably chose to write about alienation because it's one of the aspects in his life that has influenced him the most. The feeling of being lonely, of not being able to relate to other people. Or as Kevin himself chose to explain it, for me, it's like the last album was singing about someone who's already blissfully in oblivion. So I was already there. Whereas this album is like the child version of that. Someone growing up and discovering other people and just realizing their place is not involved with the rest of the world kind of thing. Like discovering that you're a loner. As you can see, many of the song's lyrics refer to this topic of being an outsider.
And I know that I can't let them bring me down. And I gotta bide my time as I face in the crowd.
The clinging to this idea and theme of alienation is so strong that you could almost call the album a concept album. It's at least something that ties all the songs together and makes it a very simple album to understand. Now, when it comes to the psychedelic tendencies of the album, it's easy to once again point towards the guitar and synth effects. These were, after all, some of the staples for the psychedelic sound of the late 60s and early 70s. But I think it's safe to say that Kevin's voice is also playing a big part in it. Kevin usually sings in a very high tone register. His voice is very soft and sometimes quite nimble on top of the other instruments, making it very easy to take in. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on in terms of this record is what influenced Kevin to make it. What you just saw was Tame Impala member Jay Watson playing International Feel by Todd Rundgren. In an interview with Pitchfork, Parker explains how Watson introduced him to Rundgren while they were touring for their previous album, Inner Speaker. So we got back from tour one day and Jay pulled out this purple weird looking record out of his bag that he got from some record shop in some place I don't even know. And he was telling me about it as I was walking upstairs, but I wasn't really listening. I was kind of tired and jet lagged at that moment. Something about the guy from the Nas solo thing. Anyway, a few minutes later I heard some kind of cosmicness going on downstairs. I resisted a few more minutes, but the cosmicness continued, so I pulled myself downstairs to see Jay with this look on his face, like he'd just had his tits blown. Turns out that he indeed just had his tits blown. A few minutes later, I had my tits blown. The song was International Feel from the album A Wizard, a True Star by Todd Rundgren. So from that day, we were Todd Rundgren slaves. But A Wizard, a True Star wasn't the only major inspiration for this album. Kevin also states pop music as a big igniter as well. Before the album was finished, Kevin said, "I've got a whole album waiting for Kylie Minogue." That sounds like a joke, but I actually do. Although the record was inspired by pop music, Kevin ended up cutting out some of the most poppy songs from the record. According to him, they sounded a bit too cheesy and poppy. Now, there were probably many other albums as well that influenced Kevin Parker to produce this album, but there's one album in particular that needs to be mentioned here, and it's Breakfast in America by Supertramp.
She's not much of a girlfriend, never seemed to get along.
This is Kevin Parker's favorite album of all time, and it's also stated as one of his big inspirations for Lonerism specifically. So that was the music that influenced Parker during the creation of this album, but there were also people in the record business, basically his label, that also influenced the creation of this album. In interviews, he has stated that the songs he creates often initially come from a 6 to 12 hour burst of inspiration and work, and then he can spend a year or two basically analyzing and tweaking what he has done. It's basically very hard for him to finish a project because of his hyper perfectionistic approach. So what ends up happening is that someone, most likely people from the record label that he's signed to, tells him to wrap things up and actually finish the record. And that is what happened when he created Lonerism. Another man that didn't influence Kevin directly, but definitely made an impact on the album's sound, is Dave Friedman, who stood for the mixing of it. He has famously worked with other bands in terms of mixing and producing before, such as The Flaming Lips, Weezer, MGMT, and many more. According to Kevin, he made Lonerism into an even more powerful listening experience. Now, I want to say that Lonerism is one of my all-time favorite records. It's probably up there in the top 20s, so I highly recommend that you check this one out. 6 years ago, Kevin Parker released his second album, Lonerism, under the band name Tame Impala. And I think now that we've gone through the whole album, there's only one more question to be answered.
What happened to the Impala in order for it to be tame?
No one knows. Yeah, I mean, it was just a split second that it became tame, and then after that it was wild again. So it's unknown why the person who encountered the Tame Impala didn't really question it in that way. He just sort of accepted it and was like, that's something else, and then they parted ways.
Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you want to be a part of live chats and discussions about rock music like this, then make sure you click the link on the screen right now. It will take you over to Lee Likes Live, my other channel, where I'm actually hosting live chats every single Sunday, and we could talk about music like this. Thank you so much. Bye.